Good evening and welcome to Habito's 6th Landlord Meetup. My name is Alan Fitzpatrick. I am Director of Lending Operations at Habito. So this is a crucial time for the property market that's reopened and looking to work to the new norm. All areas of the home buying market have reported post-lockdown initial spikes in volumes and interest, but is this sustainable? What government intervention is needed? Who can support you as landlords, and where are the opportunities and pitfalls? We've got a packed agenda this evening to walk you through over the next hour or so. I'm just hopefully displaying there on the screen so you can see what we're looking to cover. We will be recording the session as well, so we'll give you an opportunity to refer back to this at a later time, and I'll give you more details on where you can find it later. I'm delighted to be joined also by a distinguished panel of industry experts to guide and advise you through managing or becoming a landlord against a backdrop of uncertainty and also opportunity. There's an opportunity for you in the Q&A section of the Zoom. You'll see that at the top of your screen. So throughout today's presentation, if you want to share with me directly or for everyone, you can raise your questions. And at the end of the session, as you'll see, we've got a Q&A session with the panel. So I will do my best to make sure we present as many of those questions to the panel to answer for you. Okay, so I'd like to introduce our panel that I mentioned there. We've got Martijn, who's Chief Strategy Officer here at Habito, Kate, who's our industry property expert, Liz from Connect Mortgages, CEO of Connect, and Ying from Dynamo, both as a broker and the club. So we're delighted to have you all here today. The first thing we asked you each to do was to reflect on the lockdown. What are the lessons, what are the observations that you've seen during this period for the market? So first, Kate, I'm going to ask you to talk us through your observations. We've given you each around 5 minutes to cover this, so no pressure. And over to you.
Thank you. Got the stopwatch on, which is rare for me. So I think we know this if you've been coming to these for a little while, because I remember chatting about this sort of January, February and March. I think that we've got to accept now that there will be a level of uncertainty in the property market. And we're all worried about Brexit and how that was going to impact. And then suddenly, bang, the pandemic comes along. So I do think that you've always got to think that a safe way to think is that the market could go at any moment. And when it goes fast. Obviously, it went incredibly quickly at this time. But also, when you look at the past, when I used to monitor the media, you'd have the media would be talking about the market going up, and then 3 months later it crashed. So we have to understand that you just always have to be ready for it. If you kind of want to, certainly in buy-to-let, certainly being a landlord, you've got to make sure you can survive if it happens over the next few months. So think about very much the risks that you're taking and whether they would survive a crash. Having said that, it is becoming more perhaps robust than it has been in the past, because you're not selling clothes and cars to some extent. And I think we've been amazing over the last few years at how robust the market's been over the last 2 or 3 years, really. There's been some falls, particularly in the prime market a few years ago in London, and certainly in the south east and London market over the last few years, but they've been relatively tiny. So I think we do have, so there's more uncertainty, but that kind of peak and trough, if you like. You'll never get rid of boom and bust, as Mr. Brown said we had. So I'm not going to fall into that trap. But what we do seem to be is that boom or bust seems to be, certainly at this moment in time, a little less wide than perhaps it has been before. So, for example, you typically during a recession, you'd see 20% falls. The one bit of good news, which you perhaps won't see, and this is a bit of really sort of insider knowledge, is that I've never seen the industry work so well together over the last few months, any time in the last 20 years I've worked in it. And the reason that's really important is that it means we can drive changes and innovation. We're doing that in the home moving market. We're struggling to reach the government in the private rented sector, if I'm honest, but I'm hoping that because we're working together much more closely with some sort of ideas and thoughts we've got over the next 6 months, they will really see that landlords are not the bad guys here, and nor are agents. Actually, you're just putting roofs over people's heads. and it's not your fault if people are getting evicted because universal credit is effectively, in my view, a bad system. So that's some good news that's coming. Certainly feel this time that this government's more aware of the economic benefits of housing. There haven't been, I was really looking forward to some really exciting stuff today, and it just seems to be a repeat of what they did before. So I'm hoping there's more to come, but housing is in there. And I think the big one for me, really, with my consumer hat on, is how much consumer behaviour is going to change over the next 6 months towards housing. We've already seen the first of that in that we never expected the market to be as robust as it is at this moment in time. I can only use the phrase gobsmacked when I saw Home Track's latest cities index, which is a really good one to have a look at. They're predicting 2 to 3% increase year on year in house prices over the next 3 months. And when you think, we all know we're going into a recession, how can that be? But people are starting to see properties as a roof over their heads, perhaps more than they are and have been seeing it just as an investment, as a way to make money, and might mean people make more sensible decisions. So I actually do think, despite everything that's going on, we know we're going into a recession, but I think we're going to be all right.
Okay, thank you, Kate, for kicking us off. That's been brilliant. Thank you. Martijn, shall I hand over to you to give us your observations?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What a lockdown we've had. A lot of things have sort of changed. Some things have stayed the same. Yes, 5 things stood out for me. One is the investment technology we've done as a society has paid off. Partly that's for us as a company. Working from home worked fine for us on a very practical level, but also wider. You can't imagine this happening even 6-7 years ago, just before every supermarket could deliver home and before Amazon delivered whatever else you needed. But quite a lot of companies worked decently well. You're missing out on some creativity, you're missing out on some new ideas, but generally it was okay. And as a result, a large subsegment of brokers and lenders have stayed open throughout this crisis, which was not the case in the previous one, for instance. And that is both helpful because you have access to finance, and people are worried about the finance, have someone to talk to. But it's also calming to know that you have options. So I think that prevented a lot. The lender reaction itself varied with a bit of what I call herd behavior, where there is some reactions by one lender copied by others. So again, much better than 2008, 2009. There were, if you recall in the beginning, there were some practical issues. Some lenders couldn't get into their offices. Some people said that they always like a stamp on a document, and now it was a bit hard. Now the post system didn't work that well. And some of the bigger ones had trouble because India closed down at some point and some processing centers couldn't be helped. So there were some capacity issues, more on it later. We did see that capacity issue is used now a bit more as well. The payment holidays on both sides of the lending market have had quite a lot of effect, and there is a huge amount of traffic, so it is hard to work through. I wonder now, as we're getting out of the sort of panic stage of the pandemic, whether that capacity issue is also sometimes used as a bit of a ruse when there's actually some lenders are worried about their risk appetite and saying, well, I don't want to do high LTV, I'm not so sure about self-employed. So the risk is that one lender does that and then the following says, oh, I don't want to be the only one who has 90% mortgage out there or 80 in buy-to-let, and it becomes self-fulfilling. Not getting out of hand yet, but one to watch, I think. And we've seen a little bit of a split between specialist lenders and high street lenders in pricing, as people who needed access to the capital market struggled a little bit more. So there is more differential between the Nationwide and Paragon than there was a few months back. Very different customer groups, so it doesn't matter for an individual customer, but it's interesting. There will be a group in the middle that will have different choices. The third thing that I think is a sort of renewed clarion for us to work together, as Kate was alluding to, it's quite a brittle house purchase process. So looking at we were in the home buying and selling group together, looking at every chain in the purchase process, particularly the valuing of the property, the lawyer, the home mover. If only one of those professions is down in tools because there's a lockdown or because there's some shielding going on, the whole thing grinds to a halt. We've seen some things much better. So e-docs have been actually quite widely accepted, and a number of lenders have accepted more. So electronic pay slips instead of the faster having to print it and then scan it. But physical valuations have turned out to be quite a big issue. About 35 years after automated valuation models came to Britain, they haven't penetrated as far as they should. So we should change that in the next few years quickly. We are talking to the government, but mainly we're talking to ourselves as an industry to make collaboration between the different value chain players work better. So that will have a very practical upside for customers, namely a faster process that is less likely to go wrong. So that is good, but there's quite a lot of work to do that. It's not going to be immediate. And then sort of more on the consumer side, two observations. One is I was struck by how calm you all are. Landlords, including aspirational landlords, were saying, oh, this is new information. Then I will run my business differently. They asked for information, they asked for advice, and stayed calm. More, I think the aspirational buy-to-let customers, we've seen a little bit less of it, particularly in the middle of the lockdown. People who already had 2 or 3 properties and were thinking maybe a fourth were coming to us as a broker, as a lender throughout, and were calmly doing the sums, which is good to see. So I think we'll see a sort of acceleration of the trend towards more company buying in the name of the company rather than individual, which was going on before the pandemic anyway, as it is often more tax efficient. But I think that type of landlord will be in the majority going forward. And similarly, we've seen a lot of people, particularly on the remortgage sides, taking slightly longer deals. So taking 7 or 10 years instead of 2-year fixed, as they like the base rate where it is, and are saying, I'd like to lock this in so I don't have more uncertainty in my portfolio. And finally is a sort of more of an observation than what I've seen in the lockdown. I think it makes sort of the mantra that any good broker will tell you even stronger. When something happens, this is not a recipe to run around in circles and panic. You just make a plan and be ready to change it often. And refreshing your plan, as I say here, is just do the sums, see which of your mortgages are ready for renewal, and maybe get some advice about whether you should do that. Figure out if you're stay in touch with your tenants, make sure they can still afford the rent, don't be surprised by them. So just be aware of your options and make a plan, preparing to refresh it often. That's me, Alan.
Excellent. Thank you, Martijn. That's really helpful. Ying, can I hand over to you next?
Certainly. Thank you, Alan, for that. So I'm looking at it slightly differently, looking at the lessons that our business at Dynamo and the lessons we've learned from our lockdown and how we can hopefully thrive going forward and work with clients and landlords alike. I think the first lesson I could probably talk about is how I can't cut my own hair, hence why it looks like this. But you don't really want to know about my personal lessons, you want to learn about business ones. So I've got 8 that I'm going to cover, and I'll hopefully do that quite within the 5 minutes. So the first one is to plan and prepare. You know, this is massive. It really, you know, no one could really have truly planned for this unprecedented crisis. I think that's one thing that's true. But, you know, you should have had, as a business like we had, a business continuity plan. And, you know, that shouldn't just be a tick box exercises for businesses. And for us, indeed, we used it. And we applied it, and that allowed us to work seamlessly at home. And Martin touched on it, how you know, the technology has really aided us, and you know, that's been massive to our business. And so planning and preparing is really important. So, you know, there's an old saying is if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail, and that couldn't be more true. The second one is client and landlord engagement. Without any clients, we have no business, and without any tenants, you guys as landlords have no business. So it's really important that you constantly engage for us as a business with our clients and our landlords to be able to, identify and show them what they need to do to continue to build their property portfolio, be on the most cost-effective rate. And equally, for you guys as landlords, you need to engage with your tenants to really be aware of their situation, especially, given the challenges of employment at the moment. The third item I was talking about, which kind of goes without saying, but it's hard work. The next 12 months are going to be amongst the hardest for landlords and businesses alike. And I know within my business, our guys are working harder than they ever worked before, and they're going to have to, because if they want to continue to make a living, they're going to really have to roll their sleeves up. As furlough and government support comes to an end in autumn, tenants in sectors such as hospitality could struggle to pay the rent. Students may not return to universities. They may work remotely. If this happens, how is that going to affect tenant demand? How is that going to affect your property portfolio? So how are you going to work harder to ensure that your property is constantly let? Because without any cash flow from your tenants, we've got a problem from a business perspective. So that's important to you guys. But for us as a mortgage brokerage, it's really important we continue to work hard to service our clients and landlords. And that leads us on to demonstrating that we have the knowledge to get the credibility. More than ever, lockdown has changed LTVs, use of AVMs, lenders treating payment holidays, how they're treating self-employed people, furloughed staff. It's changing on a daily basis at the moment. It's really important that we keep abreast with all the changes so we can continue to educate our customers to make sure we can get them on the right products for their mortgages. And we've got to be one step ahead. And to do that, we constantly got to evolve. We have to keep our relationships with the lenders and be, always on our toes. The fifth item is cash is king. It's an old accounting saying, which I'm not afraid to use as an accountant myself. But whether you're a business owner, a landlord, or an employee, having cash in a bank is so important because one thing that this has certainly taught us is to expect the unexpected. Things can literally change with the flip of a coin. As we saw, a lot of people didn't even know what furlough was or even what the coronavirus was probably at the beginning of March. And by the end of March, the whole country, in fact, globally, we were locked down. I mean, that's just unprecedented. So, it's really important you have cash in the bank for a rainy day, whether you're a business, a landlord, or anyone for that matter. The sixth item is to embrace all channels of communications. Imagine, this event itself, 3 months ago would have been held somewhere in London at a nice event, but now we're doing this virtually. So we need to embrace that technology because we can't just rely on face-to-face transactions. Whilst that's important, and we can never lose sight of that. What other modes of communication are there to ensure that we can continue to evolve, continue to survive, and move forward with how the new normal is going to be? So, embrace all channels of communications, which, many of you clearly have done now being on this call. The seventh item, which was really important for us, is to inspire teams. It could be really monotonous, sleeping in your room for 8 hours, getting up, working on your Wi-Fi at the end of your bed for another 8 hours at work, and often not leaving your room. Mentally, that's really tough. And what we try to do is just keep things, fresh and energized by engaging with our staff a lot, making sure we did interesting things. Maybe we do a quiz, a workout, some games, but also some fun things. And it's really important that you get a chance to get away. And something I've learned personally is how much I enjoy walks with the family, going for walks with the dogs. That fresh air, that time out to be able to reset is so important to enable you to continue to perform your job. And that was a massive learn for us from lockdown, and something that we encouraged with our teams. And the last item really is something that, whether it's a lesson of lockdown or all facets of life, is something I'm a big believer in. That's positivity and mindset. Quite often we can talk ourselves into a recession, and let's face it, we don't really need to do that at the moment because it's going to be really, really tough out there. That's a given. You don't shut the whole world down for 3 months and not expect to have some economic impact. So of course there is going to be some tough, challenging times ahead, but with the right mindset and positivity, you can make sure you're one step ahead of your competitors, one step ahead of the landlords. And I think that's really important. Property is still a very sound investment. If you look at the alternatives, if you look at putting money in a bank, if you look in, chancing the volatility of a stock market, bricks and mortar is still a great area where you can add value, where you can leverage your investment with a bank loan, and therefore it will still provide good returns. So having a positive and a focused mindset is really important to ensure that you protect your portfolio. And from us as business owners, it's important that we protect our businesses. So I'd finish with a saying I love to use, and that's if an opportunity doesn't knock, build a door. Thank you, Alan.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing professional and personal observations there. That's brilliant. Liz, can I hand over to you finally on this section?
Yeah, of course. And when you asked me, Alan, to sort of, talk about our lockdown learnings, I thought, gosh, where do I start? There's been so much, hasn't, everything changed so much over just a very short period of 3 months. So I thought I'd sort of start by sharing everybody's sort of struggle with kind of, the first issue we had to face was getting everybody working at home successfully. We only had a team of 35 staff, so I can imagine how difficult that was for some of the lenders who maybe had 300, 400 staff to try and navigate and get them working from home. And we were very lucky actually, because just a couple of months beforehand we'd invested in some internet telephones. So, actually what happened is it doesn't matter where our guys sit, they're all on the normal office phone system. So I can count the many times that our staff said to me, oh, thank goodness we got those new phones, Liz, that was great. So, that was the sort of first thing. We got everybody working from home quite quickly. But then obviously we faced things like delays in the pipeline of existing cases that we needed to try and help our clients navigate through, particularly, those clients that needed their mortgages. So we got some lenders who were, withdrawing from the market altogether, other lenders who were changing their criteria. And, we needed to try and help our clients with that. And at the same time, again, battling with the resourcing issues that lenders were finding with, their staff working from home, having to put their staff in different departments to deal with things like payment holidays. So working through that was, one of our early challenges. And just to echo what Ying said with regards to the lender's criteria, you could forget as a mortgage advisor what you knew about a lender, because it was literally changing hourly, daily. And so it was every case, you had to sort of start from scratch and relook and continuously keep an eye on the changes that were coming to the market. And that was the biggest focus for us really, was, helping our clients to kind of replace those mortgage cases that sort of had stalled in the process. So we were looking for lenders at that time. It was great to see the lending market kind of reacting, and some lenders that hadn't done desktop valuations, i.e. valuations that didn't require a physical visit, stepping up and improving their criteria, so improving their loan to values where they would do that, or introducing that. So we were able to use that kind of area as well. We got lots of questions from our clients over this time. The first one being, around payment holidays and, how did they work and how could they get them? And there was a lot of misunderstanding in the beginning in terms of, a payment holiday is not a freebie. You've got to pay it back. And there is, going to be interest that's going to be charged on that. And in addition to that, we got a lot of questions from our clients who were trying to navigate through some of the other government support schemes. So initially with the CBILS, the coronavirus business interruption loan scheme, we got quite involved in that side of things. And that was followed obviously by the bounce back loans and also the self-employed scheme. But, what we had to communicate to quite a lot of our clients, which wasn't widely understood, is that to qualify for those schemes, you had to have trading profits, so profits from a trading business rather than profits from a buy-to-let investment business. So many of our landlords obviously didn't qualify. So it was what other types of schemes like that were out there in the general market that we could, potentially assist with the, an alternative instead. So we spent a lot of time kind of researching that market and helping on that side of things. Market today, obviously it's good that the market is now starting to settle. We're starting to see a lot of those lenders coming back, bringing back improvements to their criteria, but the market still has changed. So right here today, prior to the pandemic, we could get a buy-to-let up to 85% loan to value. That isn't available as of today. Again, prior to the pandemic, the normal loan to value for some of the specialist lenders was 80%. But actually, I think when I last looked a few days ago, there was only 4 or 5 lenders currently left in the marketplace that are doing any form of 80% loan to value. So the new normal in the buy-to-let market is sort of falling at 75% at the moment. And I think it remains to be seen, in the confidence of things like, valuation. So it was really interesting to hear what Kate said in relation to Home Track's predictions, because if that carries on, then hopefully obviously the lenders will get their confidence back in terms of being able to come back up to the 80% where we were before. I think the other markets that are still a little bit underserved in terms of returning is anybody that's involved in commercial or semi-commercial. For obvious reasons, there's still a lot of nervousness around that type of market, and holiday lets as well. So, not every lender has come back into the market and, is accepting holiday lets. So that's an area I'm kind of keen, to keep an eye on and see, as things start to improve on that side, hopefully, with those opening up in the next week or so. I think the final other thing for me, and maybe I've rattled along quite quickly here, but the final other thing for me is about presentation of cases going forward. So lots and lots of landlords have quite rightly and prudently taken payment holidays, and there was assurances from people like the FCA that if somebody took a payment holiday, they wouldn't actually have their credit status affected by taking that payment holiday. And that was certainly a directive that lenders, heard and adhered to. However, even the FCA said that doesn't necessarily change the fact that a lender might adjust its credit appetite for new lending for anybody who has actually taken payment holidays. So if you're looking to do a refinance of an existing property, if you're looking to acquire a new property, then you need to understand that when you go and make that application, you are quite likely now to get quite a lengthy set of questions from the new lender about why did you take that payment holiday? Why did you need that payment holiday? And the reason behind that is risk. Clearly, a new lender doesn't want to lend and then find that a month later you're taking a payment holiday on their new loan. And also it's thought that as a property investor, you should have some resources to meet problems like voids, to meet maintenance issues on properties. So the question would be around, why did you need to take a payment holiday even if your tenant wasn't paying? Now, as I say, it's still very prudent for somebody to do that because there was such a lot of unknown, and still is a lot of unknown in this particular market. So working with, teams like ours and Ying's, and finding the right lenders for your situation and presenting, what the situation was for you correctly to the lender, I think is going to be a key thing for property investors to think about going forward. But, there are lots of other positives about the market as well, particularly, if there is a little bit of a price correction, going to get a good deal as well, maybe. So.
Thank you so much, Liz. Thank you. And I think thank you to all the panel there for sharing your observations and lessons learned. I think there's going to be some areas that we're going to explore a little bit further as we go forward now. Can I just use the opportunity? I'll stop sharing my screen at this point. But I'll just use the opportunity, now that you've heard from the panel, it's a great opportunity to post any questions that you want them to cover based on their experiences, their expertise. So I've seen a couple of questions have come through, but please keep sending those through, and we'll look to cover those in the Q&A. So the next question I wanted to pose was around letting during the pandemic, dealing with some of the things that you guys have mentioned, payment holidays, restrictions on evictions, Airbnb restrictions. How have these specific developments impacted landlords, tenants? Liz, do you want to kick us off? I know you might have some personal experience here as well.
I'll pick up on the sort of Airbnb and holiday type, let type sort of business, because, you know, clearly if people weren't going on holiday, if people weren't sort of, you know, going and doing their business and things like that, these were types of lettings that were, you know, incredibly affected. I have holiday lets myself, and, you know, they've been completely empty for the last 3 months. So it was, you started off with, you know, the people in March, you know, asking to change their dates to next year, and then obviously April, and then May, and, you know, in terms of actually having any revenue of any description coming in, that has really affected that market. But, you know, if you do have holiday lets and you have been running them as a proper business, there has been some support, unlike the buy-to-let side of the market. So business rates, for example, for holiday lets, you know, I was able to get those waived, and holiday lets also qualify for the grants. So for every holiday let, you can get, you know, £10,000 in terms of a grant. So that's really been kind of instrumental in seeing people with these types of properties through, and that's because they are run as commercial style businesses rather than buy-to-lets, and that's really the difference. I think in terms of the market, you know, it's obviously that's going to open up now, and I've already seen a considerable number of new bookings coming through for my holiday lets from everybody who's now desperate to have their holidays. Yeah, so hopefully that continues, and they, you know, my cottages are in Rutland, which is quite close to Leicester, so it's a little bit of concern going on there at this moment in time.
I think that's one of the worries, isn't it, Liz? That you know, the last couple of days has just showed us with the local lockdown in Leicester that, you know, things can literally change like that. So whilst the bookings have gone crazy, as we've seen in the last week or so, you know, it just takes one change in policy and that could stop. And I guess that's a worry with a lot of lenders, is why they've held back from some of their Airbnb and holiday lets in recent times.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is still that kind of concern, isn't there, in the market, in what may happen in that locality. So yeah, I'm not banking the money at the moment, because I might be making some refunds if that happens. So
yeah, okay, thank you, Liz, and yeah, good observation in terms of its day by day to see how things are developing. Kate, for you.
Yeah, I think probably one of the most useful things I do a quarterly index for Belvoir, which is a big sort of letting agent, and talking to other agents. There's lots of noise at the moment around all these tenants are in this terrible, dire situation, and they're all going to be kicked out of their homes on the 23rd of August. Is the kind of rhetoric that's going on, which I don't like, because I think it's I don't think it's fair to scare tenants. Whereas in actual fact, we're looking at around, during the time, about 95% of rents being paid on time in full. 95. That did look, and it's quite interesting, that did seem to slip if you're a direct to tenant landlord. So that may be something to have a kind of think about. Why would a tenant sort of be less likely to pay direct to landlord? It might be because they're more likely to be benefits, for example. Not that benefits, actually benefits have gone up during that period of time. And actually most, I think the voids were sort of maybe were around 10%. So overall, the letting market survived from a landlord-tenant perspective incredibly well. It was much more the home buying kind of selling side that took a big hit. So it shows you that even during, probably one of the worst things that's happened to us in 100 years, if you can get the lettings right, and I think Ying was absolutely right with the cash is king. As long as you've got that base behind you for a bad day or a bad 6 months, however long this is going to go on for, then lettings is a pretty robust model. But you've got to get it right. And the one thing I would say is that talking to landlords is you've got to really remember this is an investment. It's not buying the house next door, letting it out. Not that most lenders let you do that these days, but you've got to think if I'd be worried. For me, I'm quite a cautious investor. I'd be worried if I was fully into the student market, fully into the Airbnb market. Investment for the future is all about spreading that risk. And when we're saying look at your portfolio, consider what you're doing. Have you spread the risk of your money making you money all the time in the best way you possibly can, rather than just go down one road?
Definitely agree with that.
Maybe just on the negative, just looking at all the questions we're getting in Q&A on chat, there's a lot about what does the immediate market look like. I haven't seen from lenders this question a lot around what's the quality of your tenants. Are they still going to pay in August or September? There's a sort of maybe general feeling with lenders of there's a bit of worry, but there's not a sort of increased line of questioning. So I think, and the other thing that's there, we've seen, and I'm sure Liz and Ying, you can confirm, we were worried when lockdown ended that we would have just pent up demand of everyone who was stuck in some sort of chain during the crisis. But we've seen continued volume after that. So there's sort of second thing supporting house price and transaction. Customer sentiment is there. There are people who want to move. There are people who want to remortgage. So that is there. There is a reason to believe that there will be a slight correction downwards, which is, I think, what are considered higher risk lending products, like very, very high LTV, which is now sadly redefined as over 75, which is a shame. And new builds and a couple of very crude categories. It's harder and more expensive to get a mortgage for than it was before, and that will drive maybe a little bit of a correction. What's interesting, if you look at the price forecast for both resi and buy-to-let, there is a huge array of visions of views for 2020. What's going to happen, maybe first quarter of 2021, and there's going to be an increase because everyone values their house more. There's going to be a massive drop because it's the worst things since the Great Depression. But if you look at 2021, everyone is saying, well, it's either +2 or +4, somewhere in between. So it looks, people are expecting a very rocky autumn, but not necessarily a sort of market shifting drop in house prices.
Can I just, have you got time to add to that, Alan? I think the one really big warning I'm saying to everybody is just ignore the price indices at the moment. I just did an exercise recently just to check that it was kind of all right to come out and say this, but the average house prices are irrelevant. They just couldn't be more irrelevant. You only have to look at the difference between flat inflation and house price inflation, and they're almost at opposite ends of the scales. I was looking at Harrogate the other day, flats prices hardly moved, house prices still going way beyond wages and stuff. So, and I know there's a lot of people on here saying, will London crash? Will London crash? It's gone up by this percent. The reason, property is affordable. People wouldn't buy it if it wasn't affordable. The issue is it's unaffordable for a section of people. So where teachers might have been able to buy before, they can't in some areas buy. But please, you've got property price inflation in sole property price data, free of charge on all the portals, and you can check what the price inflation's been for the last 25 years, pretty much back to recessions. So just ignore the stuff that you're hearing and focus on your own local market and talk to your own local agent. That is the information you need. Everything else, prices of some property prices, I reckon will fall by 20%. I don't think some other prices will fall at all. because there's so few coming on the market, and there's still plenty of senior consultants in hospitals or in retail who can afford to buy them. So that's my kind of big message on the market. Don't worry so much about what you're hearing. You've got the information to get the knowledge yourself. Do that. It's much, much better. Just
to add to that, Kate, if I can add, sorry, Alan. I think,
yeah, go ahead.
I think it's really important. You mentioned, what you're talking about is due diligence. When you buy a property, it does sometimes amaze me that people will only see one or two properties. I remember the first property I bought, admittedly 20 years ago, when we didn't have the luxury of Rightmove and the various portals, but I viewed tens, hundreds of properties to make sure I knew what I was buying. And I know it's a little bit of a cliche, but you make money property when you buy, and I wouldn't get too hung up on whether prices go up or down, because property is a long-term investment, and it might fall by 5%, it might fall by 6 or 7%. But if you buy well and you're holding it for the long term and you leverage correctly, you make sure it's in an area you understand where it's got high tenant demand, then for the long term, property is a superb investment. It served people very, very well, and it will continue to serve people well. So I agree, don't get too hung up on oh, I'll wait for the bigger price crash, then I'll buy. If you've got the money and you've done your research and you're ready to expand your property portfolio, then do your due diligence and make the investment. Don't pay too much attention to whether prices are going up or down.
I think you can liken it to the stock market, can't you? If you buy into the, buy stocks and shares, and you're only planning to hold them for 1 year, you're going to take a much higher risk than if you're going to hold them for 10, and you're going to see lots of ups and downs over that same period of time. And you've just got to think of property, like you said, Ying, as an investment that you hold over a period of time, and then ups and downs almost kind of level themselves out over that time frame.
Brilliant. You guys are being the great panel I knew you would be. So you're covering so much ground already, so which is fantastic. And that's before we even get to the Q&A. So it sounds like to me that the rest of this year could be quite difficult, whether you're looking at house prices or restrictions on LTVs or rent or whatever. But where do you think the opportunities are going to be? I mean, you've touched upon some of them there, but Ying, do you want to talk a little bit about the opportunities that maybe has been created in this period?
Yeah, I mean, I look as myself, I'm a landlord myself, I'm also a business owner, and the making of our business, Dynamo, formerly the buy-to-let business, was during the 2008 crisis. And I think, shrewd investors will go against the grain, and there are going to be opportunities during tough times. And, talk about price falls, if there are going to be price falls, and this is, investors are people who will start piling in, and that will soon put up prices again. But I do think, there are, it's very difficult. I think one of the questions was mentioned earlier about, localities and regions. And again, it's something which I wouldn't get too hung up on, or should I go and buy in Liverpool at the moment because they're building a new shopping centre, etc. The answer would be no. If I live in London, I think you've got to know your market really, really well, and keep within a radius of a 1 hour drive. That's something I've always been really passionate about. I remember in 2008, 2009, people, big, large landlord seminars going on, selling dreams about buying property very cheap, 2-bed, 2 down, up north, and people never saw the property. And I go back to what I was saying earlier. It's really important that you do your due diligence, but there are going to be opportunities when there is troubles in economies. There will always someone who profits, because where there's losers, there's winners. And I think what you've got to do is position yourself well within your market and where you have knowledge, and look to capitalize on those opportunities where you can.
I bet that 2-bed property is still as cheap.
It's still cheap, that's right, yeah, probably hasn't moved a penny.
I'll put a wager on that.
Anything you would add to that, Kate?
Yeah, I think that one of the big opportunities I think that has come out of this is I've been really, it sounds a bit of pathetic work, but I'm really proud about the way that so many landlords have just used this as a massive opportunity to pick up their phone to their tenants. And so many landlords, I mean, we even got, can you believe, I think it was the Express or something, a landlord got in there for being a good guy. And all he'd done, and he wasn't like massive, he'd just given, he'd had some fantastic students, and he paid him an extra 50 quid because the shops were opening back as their deposits. They paid 250 and he paid them back 300. And I think we've got a good opportunity, which we need to do, to really show the government that the kind of evil landlord, evil letting agent view, which means, and what that does is that means you're the guys that get hit for tax, and you're the guys that get hit with more rules but no enforcement money to go with it. And let's face it, that's not going to be coming forward. So I think there's a real opportunity here, actually, and there's plenty of others to talk about the investment side, really, to change the rhetoric around a landlord. And one of the things that I would say with that is private tenants typically have been your best bets up until now, particularly with the wavering and some of the really appalling practices on universal credit. But they're getting £1,000 extra a year. They've improved the local housing allowance, which they've been squeezing for the last 4 years. And if you haven't looked at taking benefit tenants in the past, you perhaps look again, because bearing in mind from October onwards, people are going to get the furloughs coming to an end, and you've got private tenants coming in. That kind of risk, it's not that universal credit is much better, it's just that that private tenant risk has kind of reached a similar level. So give them a chance, because actually, you know, a lot of people are on benefits, and with pets is my other passion, pets. So please think about the dogs and the cats, because they need homes as well. But they stay longer, and they'll look after your property. Yeah, universal credit's not best being paid, but we're hoping to get that sorted at some stage. So just think about that if you can.
Okay, great, thank you. Martijn, what do you think are the things for landlords to watch out for, the concerns going forward?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of there's riffing on Kate's point about sort of political narrative. I think the risk of landlords being seen as unhelpful materialized a little bit when we talked about payment holidays. There was a bit of, well, you should immediately give everyone a rent holiday. So I think we need to work together to make sure that doesn't get out of hand. I think there's a sort of second leg around short-term lets and Airbnb that some councils in a panic may be less positive than they should be around that in the next few months. So that's maybe to watch out for. On a very tactical positive note, if you have a property to rent to let with a garden and or very strong broadband. Maybe mentioned that before, the number of bedrooms going forward, because you do really well in your next rent set. That will work. I think overall, I think for the best landlords and the best aspirational landlords, there shouldn't be that much change. I think the next few months will be rocky. People who don't panic will get some panicky sellers, and maybe they'll get a good deal on a tactical level. People who stay with their tenants, if they struggle a bit between jobs for a month or two, will have the AST extended. So if we all stay calm, the people that will do well out of this over the next few months, I think.
Okay, thank you. Liz, how about for you, both opportunity and things to watch out for?
I think I would definitely echo what Kate has said about, you know, being mindful to, you know, consider people, consider tenants rather, that are on benefits, and also allowing them to, you know, have pets, because, you know, they, generally speaking, there is more of a restriction in terms of the numbers of landlords that will accept that, and understandably perhaps because of the potential risk, but the upside of that is that, you know, the tenants generally will make that property much more of a long-term home, will be more, you know, grateful in terms of, you know, taking care of the property and wanting to stay there, which is, you know, the longevity of tenancy is certainly something that is beneficial to landlords at this moment in time. So I would encourage that. And I, you know, for anybody that sort of says, oh, well, you know, lenders are not lending, you know, to where the property is let to DSS tenants, actually that market has kind of shifted now, and majority of lenders are now happy to kind of consider that, and you have got then obviously a regular income stream that's not necessarily going to be affected by things like the redundancies and that which may well, you know, come across us, you know, quite heavily in the coming months. I think in terms of opportunities, if I bring it back to the lending market, what's been good from my perspective in terms of this market is that lenders have almost potentially kind of been forced to elevate the things that they were going to do in technology and suddenly bring them into play right here, right now. And the lockdown forced that. So streamlining of processing with things like AVMs where possible, also with allowing, you know, electronic identification, electronic signatures with their solicitors or, you know, non-face-to-face solicitor signing. I think these are all really good things for the market because ultimately, you know, landlords have had to face a lot of extra paperwork with the PRA rules for portfolio landlords. Well, hopefully maybe this can kind of streamline a bit of it, and it's certainly been a long time coming, so that's been a positive for me.
Thank you. I'm really keen, thank you for all your input there. I mean, I think the questions we had prepared, but I'm really keen to get, although we've touched upon a few already, some of the Q&As that have come in. There's particularly, we've touched upon property prices, so I won't necessarily cover that. But I mean, in terms of furlough, economic impact going into the autumn, what's the panel's view in terms of government intervention so far and going forward? What do we expect to see that's going to sustain the recovery of the housing market, or at least give it some additional stimulus? What can we expect? I know some landlords have spoke about stamp duty and things like that.
I can do quite a quick one on this one. So I think the government's going to wait a little while. I think we've got to bear in mind that they've just spent a huge amount of money propping up the economy already. While the market is buoyant, I'd be very surprised if they do much. The only thing I expect them to look at is maybe supporting 95% mortgages. I'm going to disappoint everybody now. If you think the 3% stamp duty is going to go, if you are reading the questions, if you think somebody's going to be kind to you on mortgage relief, landlords are not going to be first in the queue of government help. But remember, you've kind of been given that on universal credit, and you've also been given a lot of help for those tenants who have lost their jobs, being furloughed and paid their money, that's still supported you. So I think we've got to recognise we've had a lot of support already. So that's my quick fire answer for you.
Okay.
I think I would just say, you know, given all of the support that they have already introduced, which has been absolutely outstanding, I must admit, for me, you know, I don't think anything is off the table. And, you know, depending on how the market goes, they're going to use whatever tools they can in order to keep the economy going. That's certainly the impression I get.
Thank you.
I think it's spot on, Liz. I was just going to say, but one thing we also shouldn't forget is that somehow at some time in the future, we're all going to have to pay for this as well. You know, there's an awful lot of money that's been spent, you know, and I agree, you know, the Conservatives have done an amazing job in propping up and you know, the relatively new Chancellor, you know, was they were calling for him to Prime Minister at one stage because of some of the measures he brought in. But you know, at some stage, it's going to hit us through tax or austerity or whatever in a few years' time. So, you know, that's a word of warning for the future.
Yeah, I sadly have to agree with all of that. So, as answering another question to give some positivity, with the government maybe not able to help more, there are a few questions about where is mortgage pricing going to go to. Yeah. Availability, I think there may be some continued issues as lenders are worried about the riskier mortgage. I think the mortgages that are out there, the reason the prices went up has sort of reversed. So capital markets were extremely nervous in March and April, and the price that an investor in mortgages had to pay almost doubled. And that market has reopened again a couple of weeks ago, and prices are falling now at a rapid clip. So I can see some of the prices for the more standard mortgage, particularly, falling in the next few weeks and months. So that should give you maybe some benefit.
There's a few other lender questions or specifics around new builds and how they're viewed and that. Is there? What's your view, Martijn, on that from a lender perspective?
Yeah, I think as I said in the beginning, I think there's lender appetite in times of crisis by a risk committee tends to be quite crude. So I think there are some categories that are broad brush harder to get at the moment. So I think new build, auction, 90% are going to be trickier for a bit, as lenders are saying, well, staying open is quite cool, and maybe at some point we'll give a little bit of leeway. Very curious to see if there's going to be movement on maybe first-time buyer, first-time landlord type movement, as that is both attractive from a long-term point of view and sort of interesting politically as well. But I think new build as a category, not so well. The question was specifically about some sort of city centre. I don't know. I refer back to sort of the wisdom of the panel earlier of that highly depends on the area and what price you're buying it at.
Yeah, I mean, just to sort of add to that, when I said go and have a look at the individual pricing, if you look at most of the city centre flats, or a lot of city centre flats, probably not most, but so I'm from Nottingham, you look at Birmingham, Glasgow, lots of them, they were just sold for too much money. And they are seriously struggling to recover. So I think perhaps one of the reasons why the lenders aren't so keen on new build lending on city centre flats is because actually look at their individual price performance and it's not great. Good doesn't mean it's not a good let, but we're still selling properties for flats for about 30% less than they were 12, 13 years ago. Which is why you've got to ignore these averages and really, really check out those local prices. But when you look at that from a lender's perspective, then I'm guessing new build centre flats aren't as attractive.
Yeah, but city by city, right? If it's an affordable housing flat in the suburb of London, pricing is steady and rising. So do the homework.
Yeah, definitely.
Does the panel think that we'll see a lot of previously commercial properties or offices turned into residential, that maybe, I think obviously off the back of planned build today? What's the views on?
Absolutely. I know that there's been an announcement with Boris. I looked to see if there's anything particularly useful on that. It does look a rejig of what they were promising anyway. So, but what we need to see is what the planning regulations are that they're going to drop. I have to say, don't get too excited because we've seen these loads, and everybody's going to have done the biggest planning change and everything. I'm bored about the amount of times I've heard that, to be honest. But definitely, if you're kind of really looking to build in that capital growth as well as get the income, looking at something like Offi to Resi, if you haven't looked at it before, that's well worth looking at. And for me, a lot of it is about, you've got to build in that capital growth now. Don't just believe it's going to come. Find a way of building it in and be more inventive, really, as an investor. If you build that capital growth in, you'll get better rental returns, and you'll have got your capital growth, and anything else that comes naturally is a bonus on top.
And better stamp duty pricing on acquisition as well as a commercial element.
That'll make everyone happy, Liz.
Yes.
There was a good question in. I don't mind, Alan. I sort of jotted them down.
Yeah, no.
Is somebody had said, are there any new customers coming in, or is all the business going through now existing? I can tell you there are rafts of people coming in. What I think we've got is people from lockdown who are jumping in, and I think people that were going to maybe look at buying over the next 6 months or so are pulling their purchase forward because of the fear of another lockdown, or that they just want to get on and move. And just to give an example of that, I mean, as I mentioned, I'm in Nottingham. The agent I was speaking to the other day, who I do trust, by the way, so I know he's not giving me any rubbish. They normally do about 5 or 6 sales in a month. They put together 5 new sales in 1 week, and that is not unusual. So this is definitely the new business market that's has come in much more robust, with much more willingness to offer higher prices than we expected, to be honest.
I can echo that as well. Yeah. So, sorry, Ying. I can echo that because actually my partner is a estate agent as well, and you know the sales that he's been doing, you know, over the last few weeks have been phenomenal, far more than ever, and the offers that you're getting are at asking price or over. So there isn't, you know, that expectation of you know getting lots of offers, you know, at a discounted price. That actually hasn't materialised at all.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I mean, it is very encouraging. I don't think any of us truly expected, you know, within the last couple of weeks, the amount of activity that has actually, that has happened in the market. And, you know, it's great to see, you know, will it continue? We all hope so. You know, why is it happening? Is it off the back of, you know, people were delaying, waiting for Brexit, then were ready to mobilise, kind of got their ducks lined up, and then suddenly lockdown happened, and, you know, it's all this pent up demand. People have been locked in their houses for 3 months. You know, that is good and bad things. You know, people think suddenly, you know, if you're in 1-bedroom flat in central London, you might be thinking, well, you know, if I can work from home, maybe I need to get a 3-bedroom semi-detached in the home counties, and that's creating demand. You know, equally sad to say, you know, some couples who've been cooped together for 3 months are probably saying, well, maybe we're not suited for each other, and that's creating 2 further purchases. So, you know, there's lots of reasons out there. My only concern is, you know, how sustainable is it? You know, we've had great activity in the last few weeks, but does it really make up for three months of no activity? Probably not. So we need to see that continually sustained. And the time which we've all talked about, which is the pinch point for businesses and the economy in general, is autumn. You know, once that government support stops, you know, and, you know, furloughed people become redundant people, you know, the impact that will have on tenants, the impact that will have on banks giving mortgages to people. And we can already see there's a real nervousness with lenders. You know, they're really scrutinising landlords' bank statements to make sure tenants have been paying their money. Can they keep affording it? And it goes back to right to the beginning, which Liz mentioned about payment holidays. You know, that was really terribly positioned, in my opinion, from the government. You know, the word holidays is just the wrong word. You know, it's a deferral. If anything, you know, unfortunately, many people jumped on the bandwagon without any questions asked. And whilst it won't affect their credit per se, it will affect their future borrowing. And that is, for me, one of the biggest takeaways which we have to learn from this. And hopefully, though, it will create an opportunity. Specialist lenders, maybe not so much the vanilla lenders, who are much more, have you taken a payment holiday? Yes, well, I'm not going to consider you. But specialist lenders will take a much more pragmatic view and look at it. You know, you're a commercial underwriter looking and go, actually, yes, that person took a payment holiday. But, you know, was it because they had no money, or was it because they were led to believe that it was, you know, free money or a bit of a break? If that's the reason, but they had plenty of cash flow keep coming in, plus they had plenty of money in the bank, are they really additional risk? No. So, you know, maybe specialist lenders will grow into that market to cater this potential hole that will be coming.
Yeah, just building on that, Ying, we were speaking to some of the industry yesterday, and they're getting people taking, a minority of people have been taking payment holidays or payment deferrals and have overpaid every single month since. So they like the option value, not having to pay, but we're able to, and we're continuing. Well, that's the sort of customer you really want to say yes to, right? When they come up for remortgage. So I think that the solution machine will not be that useful in this category. Maybe one more category to add. We see remortgage quite busy at the moment. I'm not sure if you guys are seeing the same thing. And I think just as people invariably at some point have worried, well, what happens if I lose my job? Or what happens if my business becomes less valuable? Looking at finances in great detail has happened. And while it has been worrying, it's the positive outcome is people saying, well, actually, I have this big outlay and maybe I can reduce my monthly payments, or maybe I've been under leveraged, or maybe I have too many lenders I want to consolidate, or now is the time, as you say, invest in property to build that extension, and I'm gonna put some extra money in the pot. So we are seeing the customers that are coming now are very motivated and very knowledgeable about their finances, and that gives me the feeling that this is not a 1 week thing, but it's going to be pretty sustainable.
Okay, thank you. I'm conscious of time, and I think we've covered a huge amount of the questions that have come in. Just one final thought or observation from you all for me is obviously the the market has shown great resilience through this and innovation, as you've all mentioned, and collaboration. But how do you think it will cope with either if the interest is not sustained, or if we see kind of regional or city lockdowns, further spikes? What's your big concerns there?
I think we're going to have to learn on that, really, and Leicester is one to watch. So we're going to hopefully know in the next 24 hours whether I very much hope they allow the housing market to continue. I'd like it to slip in the essential category. I think we did a lot of, having sort of worked a lot on the guidance and that, I think a lot of the reason for the virus spreading could be reduced. And it's not a huge threat like some other industries, but whether it will make it through. But I actually think almost the fear of a second wave is pushing the market forward currently, and bringing that demand forward. So it's almost weirdly having a strange positive effect. But as Ying said, that's going to hit some point, and that's got to be kind of October, November time. So it all goes back, I think, to just making sure you've really, really got your finances in order, and you've got some spare cash sitting around if you need.
Okay. Anyone else on that point?
I think I would just add that I think that everybody in this market, whether it is a lender, whether it is a landlord, whether it's a tenant wanting to protect the place that they live, or whether it's, mortgage advisor, we're all kind of really motivated, and we're actually all very resilient type characters, which we've proven over the pandemic. We've also proven in the past with things like the credit crunch. So, we don't know at this stage what else we're going to need to deal with, but I am still confident that whatever that is, we will find ways to deal with it, and ways to adjust, and ways to navigate through with it, and hopefully come out the end as strong as we were.
Thank you.
I agree, Liz. I mean, my final comments would be that none of us have a crystal ball. None of us really truly knows what's going to happen tomorrow, let alone the next 6 months. These are just crazy, crazy times. But what I would say is keep that open dialogue, speak to the professionals. We're all here to help. We're in this together. And together we'll pull through it, and stay focused, and stay positive, and most importantly, stay safe.
Thank you. Martijn?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. You may have picked up from the very heavy accent. I'm not British, but Britain has the advantage of many other countries that a lot of the key advisors are working for free. So there's stages, sometimes all of mortgage broking that can be done for free. Estate agents on the buy side, you can talk and inquire, and there's lots you can read from Rightmove, Zoopla. So get paid advice if you want, but there's also a lot of free advice you get. So while there's so much uncertainty, you don't have to figure it out yourself. You can just walk around, get advice, get an advisor, and you'll be in a much better position. So as we all have a bit more time without commuting in our life, use it wisely and grow your portfolio.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I think we'll pull it to a conclusion there. I just wanted to thank all of you as our panelists for being so awesome and giving us such valuable insight into the opportunities and the challenges ahead. I know I found that very useful, so I hope everyone who's joined us does as well, and we look forward to seeing you at future events. If you would like to sign up to our newsletter, you can go to www.habito.com. At the bottom of the homepage, you can sign up to our newsletter. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we'll be sharing a recording of this meetup on Facebook on Habito's Buy to Let Club page. So we'll have that up there in the next few days if you want to refer back to this. So once again, just leaves me to say thank you to everyone that's joined us, including the panel. Stay safe, say well, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.